dwelling, revenge no refuge finds, where joy his bosom swelling, and love to duty binds. Thus led by friendship's guiding hand, in peace we reach the better land. Thus led by friendship's guiding hand, in peace we reach the better land. Thus led by friendship's guiding hand, in peace we reach the better land. The better land. These holy walls around us confine but willing hearts, released from cares that bound us, none fear, no traitorous arts. No mortal harboring thought unkind within these walls can refuge find. No mortal harboring thought unkind within these walls can refuge find. No mortal harboring thoughts unkind within these walls can refuge find. Can refuge find.
Welcome. Welcome to the First Universalist Church of Rochester, where we are called to nurture the spirit and serve the community. Whoever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, you are welcome here. Whomever you love, you are welcome here. Whether you are overwhelmed with busyness or seeking to fill empty hours, you are welcome here. All of you is welcome here. It is good to be together this morning. We acknowledge with respect the Seneca Nation, keepers of the Western Door, people on whose ancestral lands First Universalist now stands. If you are here for the first time this morning, we especially welcome you. We have a visitor's form that can be found in the chat. Please click on it and fill out the form so that we may offer you a welcome beyond this worship service. As we gather this morning, we want to invite you to pop into the chat and offer a greeting. You can find this at the top or the bottom of the screen with an icon of a text bubble and the word chat. So please pop on over and offer a greeting. It could be a wave of hello or an I'm here or whatever you prefer. Welcome. Welcome to worship at First Universalist. Let us join hearts and voices in singing together this morning, recognizing that even as we are singing muted in our own home, we are creating a song across our city of Rochester, the country, and the world. Let us sing together hymn number 8, Mother Spirit, Father Spirit.
Oh In our service last Sunday, Kitty Forbush sang "Love Don't Need a Reason" by Michael Callan. Every verse ends with the refrain, "Love is all we have for now. What we don't have is time." I've been thinking about those words all week. Love is all we have for now. What we don't have is time. The COVID pandemic makes it harder to ignore that we are, in fact, actually mortal. The time is now to love and to be loved. And the needs of the world seem so urgent. So what shall we do with our precious time? We come together in the peace of this sacred hour to help each other find the space and vision and courage to choose, to say no to what we need to leave behind, to say yes to what calls to heart and mind and spirit. With gratitude for this time we share, come, let us worship together. As Peter lights our chalice at First Universalist Church, and we light chalices in our own homes, will you join me in saying our chalice words in unison? May we be a people of welcome, here to grow in heart and mind and spirit, and may we reach out to serve our community. Please join me in our affirmation of faith, followed by our doxology. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the source and meaning of life. Thus do we covenant with each other and with all. Over the past year and a half, our church family has been challenged in more ways than we can count. We have cried, we have grown tired, we have improvised, we have innovated, we have held each other in love. And now we're looking forward to what comes next. All this has been possible because of your support. We invite you to give as you are able to help us build a strong future together. Please click the link in the chat to give online to the First Universalist Church, or feel free to send a check in the physical mail.
I know I've come before, asking
I invite you into this reverent time of sharing the joys and sorrows of our gathered community. If you would like to, you can place your hand over your heart to be able to listen from this heart-centered place. As I place stones into a bowl, Bridget will read aloud the joys and sorrows of our gathered community. All are invited to share your joys and sorrows in the chat that we may hear from the community gathered here this morning.
I'll begin with a concern that Steve shared earlier, which was, I'm sorry, I must leave now to take care of my wife. Please keep her in your thoughts and prayers as she is having major abdominal surgery Tuesday to remove pancreas, bile duct, and parts of her intestines. And several other people said that they were thinking of Steve and his family. Lois Baum shared that she visited Farm Sanctuary in Watkins Glen yesterday and loved it. John Lukes and Carol Zimberlin, our friend Wendy is recovering from an emergency appendectomy at Rochester Regional Health. Patty Goodwin, my great niece and my great nephew are both expecting their first children. And Peter has a joy to share.
This joy is from Reverend Myra Brown. I am happy to announce that Assemblyman Harry Bronson called me yesterday to say that his office has decided to fund phase 1 of our Civil Rights Heritage Site project for $500,000. It is our first big win. It has been a long road of writing grants and fundraising, but this funding support is just the springboard that we needed to move our project forward. It is time to celebrate. Great job, everyone who was involved. And we drop one final stone into the bowl to represent all the joys and sorrows left unspoken in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts. May we all be held in the heart of love. Today, we also light a white candle. A white candle to acknowledge that we are a community still affected by the grief, loss, and fear of living through a pandemic. May this candle's flame hold our experiences around this horrific disease, and may its light be a beacon of hope and a reminder that we are not alone. I invite you now to join with me in a spirit of prayer and meditation as we listen to these words from Thich Nhat Hanh. We tend to be busy all day, and when we come home, we continue to be busy. We cook, we clean, we putter around. Or we are so tired of being busy that we want to do something mindless and easy, like watching a television show or taking a nap. Then we go back to being busy. There is a way to feel refreshed and alert without being busy. All we need is a gentle reminder, a location, an image, or a sound to help us return home to ourselves and to pay attention to what is there inside of us and around us. We can touch the present moment in all its fullness and joy if we simply have a place and a way to stop. Amen. I invite you now to join us in singing the hymn of contemplation, Spirit of Life. I think of all the aspects of in-person church, the one I miss the most is the hymn singing. Another word from Thich Nhat Hanh, be one with the leaf. I asked the leaf whether it was frightened because it was autumn and the other leaves were falling. The leaf told me, no. During the whole spring and summer, I was completely alive. I worked hard to help nourish the tree, and now much of me is in the tree. I am not limited by this form. I am also the whole tree, and when I go back to the soil, I will continue to nourish the tree. So I don't worry at all. As I leave this branch and float to the ground, I will wave to the tree and tell her, I will see you again very soon. That day there was a wind blowing, and after a while I saw the leaf leave the branch and float down to the soil, dancing joyfully, because as it floated, it saw itself already there in the tree. It was so happy. I bowed my head knowing that I have a lot to learn from the leaf. So please continue to look back and you will see that you have always been here. Let us look together and penetrate into the life of a leaf so we may be one with the leaf. Let us penetrate and be one with the cloud or with the wave to realize our own nature as water and be free from our fear. If we look very deeply, we will transcend both birth and death. Tomorrow, I will continue to be, but you will have to be very attentive to see me. I will be a flower or a leaf. I will be in these forms and I will say hello to you. If you are attentive enough, you will recognize me and you may greet me. I will be very happy. There are lots and lots of steps to becoming a UU minister. You can rest assured that anyone who has been called to serve this church has jumped through lots of hoops to get here. One thing that is required is an in-depth evaluation of one's psychological makeup. Candidates for the ministry have to undergo 3 days of intense testing and evaluation at what's called a Center for Career Development in Ministry. During these 3 days, candidates have to take multiple personality tests and other sorts of inventories, such as the Myers-Briggs, the Enneagram, and the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. There are several others that we take as well, but these are the best known ones. I took all of these and I took many more over a 3-day period at one of these centers in Andover, Massachusetts. I took one, the name of which I no longer recall, which specifically tested how introverted or extroverted a person was. Now, it's odd that I didn't remember this one, that I can't recall the name of this one, because this is the one that yielded a result that offended me. This particular test that I took labeled me as an extreme extrovert, as extroverted as their scale allowed. Well, now that part was fine with me. I wasn't surprised or dismayed at all to have the extrovert label. What offended me was when I read the narrative description of myself based on this test. And as closely as I can recall, after about 23 years, this is basically what it said. It said, this individual has an extreme need to be around people. He is fearful of time alone. If this individual were forced to stay for a weekend alone in an isolated farmhouse where there was no telephone, he would become extremely anxious. He would desperately seek a way to seek contact with people. And if he could not find one, he would watch movies or read books about people to fill his extreme need for constant human connection. Seriously? That is who this piece of paper with a pre-made answer key thinks that I am? It made me sound so weak, so dependent, frankly, so pathetic. That is so not me. I protested to my friends when I got the results back. Here's what I said. I am so much stronger and so much more independent than that. Well, I guess even these inventories that you take have their limitations. What this test doesn't know about me is that I would love nothing more than to live way out in the country with no phone. That has long been a fantasy of mine. This test does not know that Living the Good Life, a book about rural homesteading with no modern conveniences by Helen and Scott Nearing, is one of my favorite books. This little test doesn't know that I can't get enough of shows like Little House on the Prairie. It didn't know how many books I had read about asceticism or about the monastic path. Why, I will have you know that I once camped in the woods for 2 nights to attend a Peter, Paul, and Mary concert at Chautauqua. Clearly, this inventory had no idea who it was dealing with. You could probably see what's coming. About a year later, I had an inviting opportunity. The Unitarian Universalist Church in Traverse City, Michigan was looking for guest preachers to fill their pulpit during the summertime. And they sent a notice to Meadville Lombard inviting students to sign up. What made this invitation intriguing was that instead of paying us in money, each guest preacher got a week's stay at an isolated cabin in the woods. Right up my alley, I thought. I'd get a taste of living the good life. I would get to experience asceticism firsthand, and I would definitely get to deepen my spiritual practice. There was no TV, there was no internet, there was no phone at this cabin, although there was, thankfully, plumbing and electricity. Being a poor student at the time, I hadn't had a vacation away in a few years, and it was a great opportunity, I thought, to get away with my then partner, Tom, and have a little romantic getaway. How romantic it was going to be. Just the two of us for a week in the woods, cut off from the outside world with no one but each other for company. Rising early to watch the sunrise together and sitting by the campfire at night, looking at the moon and the stars. I called him and he agreed to go. So I signed up for the first Sunday in August. As July went on, I was looking forward ever more to this getaway, buying a few things we needed for the trip and collecting that pile of books. You know, we all have that pile of books that we've always meant to read but don't have the time. I was finally going to have the time. And then About 36 hours before we were supposed to leave, Tom announced that he wasn't going. He didn't feel like it, he said. Traverse City is an 8-hour car ride from Rochester. He had not realized that it was anywhere near that far when he agreed. And I must know how he hates long car rides. Besides, he reminded me, our cat needs her vitamins every day, and the neighbor who had agreed to feed her could not possibly be expected to administer vitamins also. That was asking way too much of anyone. And what if his new debit card arrived while we were gone? Someone might steal it from the mailbox, and they might spend all of our money while we're gone. No. The more he thought about it, the more our lives were just too complicated for us ever both to get away like this at the same time. Why, when you think about it, it was downright irresponsible for both of us to just head off for 7 whole days and abandon our duties. Well, of course, he understood that it was way too late for me to back out. I was scheduled to preach on Sunday, so he understood that I had to go. The only sensible thing, the only reasonable thing we could do would be to separate for that week. He'd make the sacrifice of staying home while I went off to play Thoreau in the woods. Well, of course, I was disappointed, and I will admit I was quite angry at first. Love may be blind, but even I could see that these excuses were nonsense. He just didn't want to go. It wasn't just that. He also did want me to go. For some reason, he wanted me out of the picture, safely stuck in the woods 8 hours away, which is why he waited to back out of our trip until it was way too late for me to cancel. But because experience had taught me that Tom never changed his mind, and because I also understood that I had absolutely no choice but to go, I quickly switched my mindset and I began to psych myself up for a week of being all alone in the woods. What a blessing in disguise, I began to tell myself. What a spiritual opportunity this was. A week in the woods, all by myself, completely alone, cut off from everyone, with only my own mind and my own soul for company. What a wonderful gift for a seminarian. The 8-hour drive was really long, and it was really tiring to have no one else to share the driving. But I arrived and I met the couple who owned the property where I would be staying in the parking lot of a McDonald's of all places. And I then followed them several miles out of town through ever more wooded and underpopulated wilderness until we pulled off the road and drove about a half a mile down a 1-lane dirt road through the woods. The cabin turned out to be a 1960s era mobile home set in a clearing with a small pond. The nearest neighbor was over a mile away, the couple told me, and they assured me that I would have complete privacy and isolation while I was there. And then they bid me goodbye. See you next Friday, they called as they drove off. So I stood around and I looked. There was nothing but trees for 360 degrees all around, and it was really beautiful. And the first few hours were lovely. I unpacked my food, acquainted myself with the home, and I sat in an Adirondack chair by the pond reading Buddhism Without Beliefs by Stephen Butler. I cooked a few chickpea burgers, made a salad, and had dinner. And then it started to get dark, and a funny thing happened. It began with me wondering if anyone was out there anywhere in the woods. I started worrying, what would happen if I choked on my food? No one would know. They wouldn't find me for days. I became hyper aware of the sounds outside. After an hour or two of this, I escalated into a full-blown panic attack. I couldn't concentrate on any of the books that I brought. I couldn't sit still to practice the guitar that I had brought with me, and I couldn't focus enough to write in the journal that I had intended to start that week. All I could think about, all I could focus on was my isolation. I was cut off, completely cut off. Why, the nearest person is over a mile away. There's no phone. There was not even a TV set or a working radio around so that I could at least hear the soothing sound of a human voice. So what I ended up doing, I ended up sitting in my car and listening to a distant NPR station on the car radio. And this calmed me down enough that I did eventually get to bed. The next morning was a little bit better. With the sun up, I managed to do some hiking on a well-marked trail, but I felt a new sense of being shaky and unsure of myself that I wasn't familiar with. And I was dreading nightfall, knowing that it would be a return to panic. As I hiked, it occurred to me that that personality test that I had taken a year before captured me much more accurately than I had first thought. Think about it. Here I was alone in an isolated country house with no phone or TV set, and I was behaving exactly as the report about me said that I would. I wasn't simply bored or lonely. I was in full-blown panic mode because I was completely cut off from human contact. That evening was actually even worse than the first one had been. Because I knew what was coming, the panic set in even before it got dark. How was I ever going to get through another long night? Yes, I knew that it was important for my spiritual growth to endure it. So that night, I did manage to write in my journal just a little bit, and I was able to concentrate enough to read a lighthearted memoir about a woman who took in a stray cat, and then I drifted off to sleep. The third night, however, around 9:30, I heard noises right under the kitchen window that completely pushed me over the edge. In an absolute panic, I got in my car, I drove into town, and I desperately searched for a payphone. This was the 90s, remember, no cell phones. I would call Tom, I said, and he will talk me down from my panic. He's always been good at that. I finally found a phone, and I used my Sprint calling card. And I heard the soothing sound of a ringtone that I knew was connected to a phone in my house in Rochester. And then something a little peculiar happened. I expected Tom to answer, and instead, the answering machine greeted me with the sound of my own voice, asking me to leave a message after the beep. That was really odd. It was now past 10 o'clock on a work night. Tom was always in bed reading by then. The phone was right next to the bed, and he always answered the phone at night in case his frail elderly father needed something. For this reason, I was never allowed to even turn the ringer off on the bedside phone. Maybe he's in the bathroom, I thought. After all, he had to be home. He never, ever went anywhere at night, especially never on a work night. He was the quintessential homebody. So I waited about 10 minutes and I tried again. No answer. I killed some time walking around the convenience store. I went back and I called again. No answer. By now, it was 11. There was no answer at 11:15, and there was no answer at 11:30 either. Fortunately for me, my mother was a huge night owl. And so I called her at 11:45, and she said all of the right things to calm me down, and I went back to the mobile home, and I went back to sleep. Tom didn't answer the next night either, although that night I devoted the entire evening to calling every 15 or 20 minutes. The day after that, I did reach him at work, though. He assured me that he had been home all evening, every night that I had called, in bed reading, as always, and that either I must have somehow been dialing the wrong number or the ringer on our phone must be broken. When I pointed out that I got the answering machine each time I called and that he would have heard me speaking into the answering machine, he promptly added a previously omitted detail. Oh, I can explain that. You see, he missed me so much that he had been sleeping on the couch away from the phone and going to sleep every night right after dinner to cope with the acute loneliness that my absence was causing him. He was sure he had mentioned that at the start of the call. I just must have forgotten. I was used to these conversations. Throughout the 10 years or so at that point that we had been together, there were many times that he had gone missing at unexpected times and provided odd reasons for his absences. Reasons that would change if I asked him more than once. Flat tires that became dead batteries with the second or third telling of the story, coworkers who needed his help, who were female in the first version of the story and male in the second version, which, when this discrepancy was pointed out, could effortlessly morph into two coworkers, one female and one male. He was sure he'd mentioned that at the outset. Emergency dental appointments for toothaches that were never complained about in my presence. The deer he managed to hit without leaving a mark on the car, and the hapless father who it seemed took fall after fall after fall, all of them serious enough to warrant Tom's being called, but yet never serious somehow enough to cause any noticeable injury. And yet, for years, I had been having these experiences and never really let myself ponder why so much of the time, why so often he went missing at odd, uncharacteristic times. And when he did, and I asked, the stories he gave me didn't add up. Always before, I had been immersed in busyness, school, work, friends, chorus rehearsals, committee meetings. I was always busy, always involved in something that was beyond and outside of myself. But that evening, back in the isolation of the mobile home, I was again very unsettled. But this time, it wasn't so much the panic of being alone, it was the lack of distraction and busyness. Before, whenever there was one of these unsettling incidents, when my partner had given me odd stories, some form of busyness had always rescued me before I really had time to ponder what might be going on. Now, for the first time, all alone, with no company and with nothing to do, I let myself think about it, really think about it. Over the next few days, I reviewed a lot of memories. Incidents that I'd forgotten came back to me in surprising detail. Times when he hadn't been where I thought he was, times when phone calls ended abruptly as soon as I entered a room, many times when men that I didn't know greeted him with surprising warmth and familiarity in public places, after which he'd claim he barely knew them and was surprised by their attention. As I hiked by day and sat alone by night, I reviewed it all 10 years of it. It was not a pleasant experience, but maybe I was more willing to do it because when I was thinking this over, at least I wasn't in a full-blown panic attack over being alone and cut off and isolated. In any case, it was a useful and necessary and important experience and long overdue. Now, we're a mature group. Anyone who has ever had an unfaithful spouse or watched as the world turns knows the conclusion I came to about all of the inconsistencies in my partner's stories. It's the only one that made any sense. But what really struck me during that isolated week was not the conclusion that I had drawn from my review of the evidence. It was the fact that I really had known it all along. What was new was the fact that I allowed myself to think about it. And even more importantly, that I was allowing the emotions that went with this realization to fill my being. Because of my forced isolation, I was thinking things I normally didn't think or wouldn't let myself think, and feeling things I normally would not let myself feel. But they weren't really new. They were just closer to the surface than usual. And for once, I allowed them to take center stage. I was at last in touch with something that I actually already knew, had known for a long time, and needed to acknowledge. And it took a lack of busyness to bring my heart and soul to a new place a more authentic place. Not a happy place, not a pleasant place, but an authentic one. As Thich Nhat Hanh said in the prayer, I had returned home to myself, to what I really knew, and on some level had experienced for a long time to be true, but didn't fully grasp on a completely conscious level because I had developed the habit of letting busyness fill my soul and push those thoughts and feelings away. Busyness. We are all immersed in it. Most of us associate busyness with work, but it can take many forms. Book clubs, choir singing, golf. It can be eating out, season tickets to Jiva, or charity work. We live in a culture that not only encourages and rewards busyness, but one that shames and marginalizes anyone who resists its lure. And we cling to it steadfastly, believing that it always serves us to be distracted. Because we all, each and every one of us, has unsettling thoughts and feelings that we'd like to keep at bay. And we don't willingly abandon our busyness. It usually takes an experience like my week in the woods when we have no choice and nothing else to do before we confront the things that we all prefer to keep buried. Now, I would like to say that after that week, from then on, I made a conscious and regular effort to eschew busyness, and that I regularly put myself in similar situations where I was forced to be with my authentic self. But I will admit that is not the case. It's not human nature to seek out discomfort. No matter how good or even necessary it can be for our spiritual growth and our personal development, most of us have to have it forced upon us. Now, in most cases, it's forced on us individually at different moments. But last March, it was forced upon the entire human race all at once, all at the same time, as the world for each and every one of us fell away. And while it's true that many of us in healthcare and other fields worked harder than ever at our actual jobs, we all, no matter who we were or what we did, we all faced a dramatic shrinking of the world as we knew it. We all had to spend much more time alone than we ever had before, in our homes, away from our friends, away from our relatives, deprived of mostly all of the activities that we usually use to distract and comfort ourselves. And all of the busyness that kept unpleasant thoughts and unwelcome reality from occupying center stage in our lives. And it wasn't a comfortable experience for most people. I don't think it's any coincidence that from what I read, alcohol sales were at an all-time high during 2020. For the first time in most of our lives, we were forced to abandon much of the busyness that sustains our illusions about ourselves and our lives. Like my week in the woods, none of us really had anywhere to escape to. So, how was it for you? Did you discover an activity that you thought you loved and then find out you didn't really miss it? Did you find yourself missing someone that you didn't think you liked? Did you discover things about yourself that you didn't like and only saw when you no longer had busyness to hide behind? Did you notice holes in your life that you didn't know were there, or at least hadn't fully acknowledged before? Did things come up for you that you knew you needed to address? And how many of these discoveries were really total surprises? How many of them were more like my experience in the woods, where you finally got fully in touch with things that you already knew and things that you had felt all along, but had pushed away for a long time with busyness, with a busyness that was no longer available? I called this sermon Pandemic Freedom not because the isolation was fun, but because it was, for most people, in a painful but probably necessary way, a bit liberating. The isolation gave each and every one of us an opportunity, like my experience in the woods in Michigan, to see our lives in their unvarnished authenticity. The failings, the lackings, the realities that no matter how much we would like to, can't be denied. The things that we can change and those things that we just must endure. So now, just recently, it seems that the world is rushing back to normal. We are all suddenly being presented with more opportunities to come out of our isolation. But how many of us are going to have things go back to exactly what they were like in December of 2019? The good news this morning is that there has never been a better time for each and every one of us to make some needed changes, to get in touch with the authentic piece of ourselves that knows already the deepest truths, the ones we normally bury in busyness. Now, after this story that I told you in the woods in the 90s, I did not make instant changes in my life. That relationship limped along for several more years. But when it ended, when it finally did end, I believe that I was more ready than I ever could have imagined I was because of my experience in the Michigan woods. Most, if not all of us, will someday end up in some situation that we can't escape with busyness. It might be an illness or a disability, the death of a loved one, or the loss of our independence. And when this time does arrive, we will all be forced to live with our authentic reality, no matter what it is. If you got a taste of this experience during the pandemic, I urge you to take that taste and try to make it a regular meal. Spend at least a little bit of time every day dwelling honestly and authentically with those things that must be faced. You never know when you might find yourself in an isolated mobile home in the Michigan woods. Our final hymn is number 12, O Life That Make All Things New. We invite you to remain muted and sing out joyfully from home, again creating a collective song from wherever we find ourselves.
Our thoughts within
As we extinguish our chalice flame this morning, let us read together the words printed on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but keep its light in our hearts with its message of love and justice, taking it outside these walls to the world we live in until we are together again. Though we cannot be seated next to one another, we are still connected, very connected in this community. As we come to a time to close our service, I want to invite you into an embodied practice of holding hands from a distance at the end of our service. If you are joining us by video, please change your view to gallery view rather than speaker view, and then reach your hands out to the edge of the screen. For people here by phone, place a hand over your heart and bring to mind someone you dearly love. May all beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the cause of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is sorrowless. And may all live in equanimity without too much attachment and too much aversion, and believing in the equality of our lives. Let the people of the church say together, Amen. As we come to the time to close our service, I invite you to follow this benediction with the words, may I not lose myself in busyness. Please join us in typing these words into the chat together. May I not lose myself in busyness. And let us end our service and go into the postlude by saying together, Amen.